clean water laws are ignored at a cost and suffering. Almost 4 decades ago, Congress passed the Clean Water Act to force polluters to disclose the toxins they dump into waterways and to give regulators the power to fine or jail offenders. States have passed pollution laws or statutes of their own, but in recent years, violations of the Clean Water Act have risen steadily across the nation. An extensive review of water pollution records shows in the last 5 years alone, chemical factories, manufacturing plants, and other workplaces have violated water pollution laws more than 500,000 times. The violations range from failing to report emissions to dumping toxins at concentrations regulators say might contribute to birth defects and other illnesses and diseases. However, the vast majority of those polluters have escaped punishment. State officials have repeatedly ignored obvious illegal dumping, and the Environmental Protection Agency, which can prosecute polluters when states fail to act, has often declined to intervene. Concerns over these toxins are great enough that Congress and the EPA regulate more than 100 pollutants through the Clean Water Act and strictly limit 91 chemicals or contaminants in tap water through the Safe Drinking Water Act. Regulators themselves acknowledge lapses. The new EPA Administrator, Lisa P. Jackson, said in an interview, but despite many successes since the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972, today the nation's water does not meet public health goals, and enforcement of water pollution laws is unacceptably low. She added that strengthening water protections is among her top priorities. State regulators say they are doing their best with insufficient resources. Research shows that an estimated 1 in 10 Americans have been exposed to drinking water that contains dangerous chemicals or fails to meet a federal health benchmark in other ways. Those exposures include carcinogens in the tap water of major American cities and unsafe chemicals in drinking water wells which are not typically regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act, are more likely to contain contaminants than municipal water systems. And because most of today's water pollution has no taste or scent, many people who consume dangerous chemicals do not realize it, even after they become sick, researchers say. An estimated 19.5 million Americans fall ill each year from drinking water contaminated with parasites, bacteria, or viruses. According to a study published last year in the scientific journal Reviews of Environmental Contamination and Toxicology. And that figure does not include illnesses caused by other chemicals and toxins. In the nation's largest dairy states, like Wisconsin and California, farmers have sprayed liquefied animal feces onto fields, where it has seeped into wells, causing severe infections. Tap water in parts of the Farm Belt, including cities in Illinois, Kansas, Missouri, and Indiana, has contained pesticides at concentrations that some scientists have linked to birth defects and fertility problems. In parts of New York, Ohio, Rhode Island, California, and other states where sewer systems cannot accommodate heavy rains, untreated human waste has flowed into rivers and washed onto beaches. Drinking water in parts of New Jersey, New York, Arizona, and other states shows some of the highest concentrations of a dry cleaning solvent that has been linked to kidney damage and cancer and other diseases. 40% of the nation's community water systems violated the Safe Drinking Water Act at least once, according to analysis of EPA data. Those violations ranged from failing to maintain proper paperwork to allowing carcinogens into tap water. Last year, more than 23 million people received drinking water from municipal systems that violated a health-based standard. In some cases, people got sick right away. In other situations, pollutants like chemicals, inorganic toxins, and heavy metals can accumulate in the body for years or decades before they cause problems. Some of the most frequently detected contaminants have been linked to birth defects and neurological disorders. Records that have been analyzed indicate that the Clean Water Act has been violated more than 506,000 times just since 2004 by more than 23,000 companies and other faculties, according to reports submitted by the polluters themselves. Companies sometimes test what they're dumping only once a quarter, so the actual number of days when they broke the law is often much higher. And some companies illegally avoid reporting their emissions, say officials, so infractions go unrecorded. Environmental groups say the number of Clean Water Act violations has increased significantly in the last decade. Comprehensive data goes back only 5 years, which show that the number of faculties violating the Clean Water Act grew more than 16% from 2004 to 2007, the most recent year of complete data. Polluters include small companies like gas stations, dry cleaners, shopping malls, and the Friendly Acres Mobile Home Park in LaPorte, Indiana, which acknowledged to regulators that it had dumped human waste into a nearby river for 3 years. They also include large operations like chemical factories, power plants, sewage treatment centers, and one of the biggest zinc smelters, the Horsehead Corporation of Pennsylvania, which has dumped illegal concentrations of lead, copper, zinc, chlorine, and other chemicals and metals into the Ohio River. Those chemicals can contribute to mental retardation, cancer, and other illnesses. Some violations are relatively minor, but approximately 60% of the polluters were deemed insignificant non-compliance, meaning their violations were the most serious kind, like dumping cancer-causing chemicals or failing to measure or report when they pollute. More research shows that fewer than 3% of Clean Water Act violations resulted in fines or other significant punishments by state officials, and the EPA has often declined to prosecute polluters or force states to strengthen their enforcement by threatening to withhold federal money or take away powers the agency has delegated to state officials. The EPA and the states have completely dropped the ball. Without oversight and enforcement, companies will use our lakes and rivers as dumping grounds, and that's exactly what is apparently going on. The EPA Administrator, Ms. Jackson, whose appointment was confirmed in January, said in an interview that she intended to strengthen enforcement of the Clean Water Act and hopefully pressure states to apply the law. I've been saying since day one I want to work on these water issues pretty broadly across the country. The EPA has said that it was reviewing dozens of coal mining permits in West Virginia and 3 other states to make sure they would not violate the Clean Water Act. Unchecked pollution still, though, remains a problem in many states. More pollution. Yes, and unchecked pollution. Hundreds of thousands of violations of the Clean Water Act in just the last few years, basically alone. The earth is becoming contaminated, and more polluted. And, again, everything is connected. There's much more going on here. And these are more signs of the end times, transition days. Transition is still happening daily all around the world.